They say time heals all wounds. But what no one tells you is that time also has a way of exposing the truth, especially for the one who let you go. At first, your ex might seem unbothered, even relieved. They distract themselves with new people, new routines, and the illusion that they've made the right choice. But the truth? It doesn't hit them right away. It creeps in silently, often when they least expect it. It's in the quiet moments, the late night scroll through their phone, the laughter that doesn't feel quite as real, the conversations that lack depth. When they start to notice something is missing, that something is you. What they don't realize is that your absence speaks louder than any words ever could. The emotional high they felt in the beginning starts to fade, and the contrast between life with you and life without you becomes painfully clear. They begin to feel the shift in your energy, the moment you stop chasing, stop waiting, and start reclaiming yourself. And when the weight of losing you finally crashes down on them, it doesn't come softly. It hits harder than they ever imagined. And by then, you're no longer standing where they left you. When you leave someone's life, there's this moment they expect. They expect noise, they expect arguments, messages, calls, explanations, drama. They expect you to try to fix things, to fight for their attention, to make sure they don't forget about you. And when you don't do any of that, when you go quiet, when you disappear, it feels strange to them at first, almost unnatural, but they don't really process it yet. At first, they might even feel relief. They might mistake your silence for weakness, thinking, she's giving me space because she still wants me. She's probably waiting. She'll come back around when I'm ready to talk. But what they don't realize is that absence doesn't whisper. It screams. And the longer you stay gone, the louder it gets. Your absence doesn't just leave a hole in their day-to-day life. It starts to echo in moments they don't expect. It's when they reach for their phone to send a meme or complain about their awful boss, and then remember, you're not there anymore. It's when they hear a song in the car and it brings back the memory of you singing out of tune, laughing so hard you couldn't breathe. At first, they shake it off. They tell themselves, I'm fine. But then those little reminders start piling up. They aren't ready for how much space you actually took up in their world, not just physically, but emotionally. People think they miss the person, but what really happens is they miss the way that person made them feel. They miss the comfort, the support, the validation, the warmth you gave so freely. You were a constant in their life, and now that constant is gone. That's when it starts to hit them. Not because you forced it, not because you tried to prove your worth, but because the reality of your absence is undeniable. They can distract themselves for a while, nights out, new people, work, hobbies. They'll try it all. And for some of us, it will take, but every distraction eventually ends. The night out becomes quiet when they come home alone. The new connection doesn't feel the same because it's still surface level and they can't recreate the bond they had with you. And that's the irony, isn't it? The very thing they thought they wanted, space, freedom, turns out to be the thing that makes them feel your absence most sharply. When you remove your energy from their life, they start to feel the weight of it. Energy is everything. Your love, your attention, your kindness, your laughter, those things carried more weight than they realized. But you're no longer pouring it into them, and now they have to sit with the emptiness. What's so powerful about this is that you're not doing it as a tactic. You're not trying to manipulate them into missing you. You're stepping back because you're protecting your peace, your self-respect, your worth. And as you do that, you take away the thing they'd grown used to, the certainty of you That certainty is gone, and in its place is a quiet they didn't expect. This is why absence hits harder than any words could. You could send them 100 texts trying to explain what they lost, but nothing will make them feel it the way your silence does. Because silence isn't just nothingness, it's a mirror. It forces them to face themselves without the cushion of your presence softening the edges of their life. And for the first time, they see the real cost of letting you go. You see, people don't truly appreciate what they have until they realize it's no longer guaranteed. And when that realization hits, it's not gentle. It's not like a soft wave. It's like being pulled into a riptide. They thought they were fine swimming away from you, but suddenly they're caught in a current of their own emotions, and they can't stop thinking about you. Not because you chased them, not because you begged, but because you didn't. That's why your absence is so powerful. It speaks for you. It says, I know my value, and I won't force you to see it. And, paradoxically, it's that very strength that makes them see it clearer than ever before. So if you've ever doubted whether stepping back was the right thing to do, trust me, it is. Because it's in your absence that they'll finally hear the truth their ego kept them from hearing while you were still around. And when they finally hear it, they'll never be able to unhear it. You know what's fascinating about human nature? When we lose someone, we don't always feel it immediately. There's this strange delay, a gap between the moment someone exits our life and the moment it truly sinks in. At first, your ex might feel free, like they've made the right choice, like they can finally breathe. They might even convince themselves they're happy now. And in those early days, they fill their schedule with noise, friends, work, parties, even meaningless conversations with people they don't really care about. It's their way of avoiding the quiet. Because in the quiet, there are echoes of you. But here's where it gets interesting. That emotional high doesn't last forever. The distractions wear thin. Those casual flings start feeling empty. The people they're surrounding themselves with can't offer the same depth, the same comfort, the same spark you brought into their life. And that's when the contrast begins to hit. At first, it's subtle. A song comes on that reminds them of you. They laugh at something and instinctively want to send you a text, only to remember you're not there. They see someone on the street who looks a little like you and feel their stomach drop. This is the moment they begin to feel the space you left behind. And that space doesn't feel liberating anymore. It feels heavy because they're starting to realize you weren't just filling time in their life, you were filling emotional space in a way no one else has. That emotional contrast is a powerful thing. It's not just about missing a person. It's about realizing the connections they're trying to build now don't feel the same. And here's the truth, most people never talk about. We don't miss people because we're lonely. We miss people because we've lost the part of ourselves we were when we were with them. Your ex is starting to notice they don't feel as alive in conversations. They don't laugh as hard. Even the comfort of their own company feels different because whether they admit it or not, a part of them was shaped by you being there. It's ironic because in the beginning, they might have thought they were moving on. They might have thought they'd outgrown the relationship, that they needed something new or exciting. And yet now they're faced with the unsettling realization that the excitement they were chasing isn't bringing them the fulfillment they imagined. And that's the moment it hits harder than they expected. See, emotional contrast doesn't happen overnight. The moment it's stretched, it tests, it screams, and suddenly the negative emotion comes up. So if you're in the moment it hits harder than they imagined, and yet now they're faced with the unsettling realization that the emotional contrast doesn't happen overnight. It's like tasting the difference between two meals. At first, both fill your stomach, but over time, you realize one left you deeply satisfied, while the other was just food. You were the meal that satisfied their soul. And as they continue chasing empty calories, they're starting to crave the nourishment only you gave them. The beautiful part is, you don't even have to do anything for this to happen. In fact, the less you do, the more likely it is to happen. Because when you're not there to reassure them, to reach out, to remind them you still care, they're left to face that emptiness on their own. And there's nothing more confronting than realizing the person you thought would always be there isn't anymore. It's in those quiet moments, late at night, after a long day, or in the middle of something that should feel fun, that they start to feel it. That little pang in their chest, that voice asking, did I make a mistake? Was I too quick to let go? Can I ever find that again? And the truth is, they don't know. That uncertainty is a storm they'll have to weather without you. But here's the shift that really shakes them. They start to notice that the version of you they thought they could come back to isn't waiting anymore. That thought alone can create panic. Because while they were busy distracting themselves, you were evolving, you were healing, growing, becoming someone who's harder to reach. Not because you're playing games, but because you're realizing your worth isn't tied to their validation. And that's when the emotional contrast hits its peak. They're not just missing you, they're realizing they might have lost the best version of themselves, the one they were when you were in their life, and in that realization, they start to question everything. The people around them don't seem as vibrant. The conversations feel more surface level. Even their victories feel less sweet because they don't have you to share them with. This is the moment they feel your absence in full force. And it doesn't come as a gentle wave. It crashes like a storm they never saw coming. Because by the time they feel it, you're no longer standing in the same place they left you. No one else is like you, and that's when it hits the hardest. It's easy to believe that the louder you are, the more someone will hear you. That if you just say the right words, send the perfect text, or pour your heart out one more time, they'll finally wake up and realize what they're losing. But here's the uncomfortable truth. It's not your words that make someone miss you. It's not your effort. It's not your explanations or your endless attempts to remind them of what you brought to their life. It's the quiet. It's the space where your voice used to be. It's the absence they didn't take seriously at first, but begins to echo louder the longer you're gone. When you step back, really step back, you give them something they can't run from, themselves. At first, they might not even notice. They'll fill their days with noise, scrolling endlessly, hanging out with friends, maybe even diving headfirst into dating someone new. They'll convince themselves they're fine. They'll tell their friends they're moving on. And for a while, it might look like they're doing exactly that. But underneath it all, something subtle starts to shift. When they're sitting alone late at night, when the notifications stop buzzing, and when the temporary highs fade, they're left with silence. And in that silence, you're not there, you're not texting, you're not calling, you're not showing up to make it easy for them to forget how much you mattered. That's when it begins. That's when your absence stops being convenient and starts being heavy. The hardest part for you is trusting this process, because everything in you wants to reach out. You want to remind them of the connection you shared. You want to fix it. You want to make sure they understand your worth. But every time you try to fill that space, you give them relief. You soothe the very discomfort they need to feel if they're ever going to realize what they had with you. Silence is powerful because it doesn't argue. It doesn't justify. It doesn't chase. It simply exists. And it forces people to feel the reality of your absence without distraction. For the first time, they're left to face the choices they made without you there to soften the consequences. They begin to remember the little things, the sound of your laugh, the way you made life easier, the comfort they felt knowing you were always there. And because you're not there anymore, they don't get to take it for granted. But here's what's even more powerful. In that silence, something else starts to happen. They begin to feel a shift, not just in your absence, but in your energy. You're no longer reaching out. You're no longer trying to keep them in your life. Whether they know it consciously or not, they can feel that change. It's unsettling because they were used to you being there no matter what. They assumed you'd always be accessible. And now, for the first time, you're not. That shift doesn't just make them miss you, it makes them question their own choices. Did they take you for granted? Did they underestimate how rare your love was? Did they assume you'd wait forever? And as those questions grow louder, so does the weight of regret. But this only works if you stay quiet long enough for the silence to do its job. If you break it too soon, if you send the "I miss you" text or check in just to see how they're doing, you rob them of the opportunity to sit with the discomfort of losing you. You give them the reassurance that you're still there, waiting in the wings. And the truth is, they don't learn to value someone who's always available. They learn to value someone when they realize their presence wasn't guaranteed. So if you're in this place right now, feeling that pull to reach out, to explain, to fight for what you had, stop and ask yourself, are you doing it because it's what they need or because it's what you need to feel in control? Because the person who truly feels your absence is the one who's left to sit with the reality that you're no longer making it easy for them to stay disconnected. The moment you step back and hold your ground is the moment the power shifts. Not in a manipulative way, not as a game, but in a way that forces the other person to show up or not. Because someone who truly values you won't stay comfortable in your absence forever, and if they do, then their absence is giving you the answer you've been looking for all along. The silence feels heavy now, but trust me, it's not empty. It's doing the work words never could. And if anyone is going to say, will the truth lie with us alone? I promise you, it's not. You know what's interesting? When a breakup happens, we assume that both people are sitting there feeling the same emotions at the same time. That if we're hurting, they must be hurting too. Or if we're feeling numb, they're probably feeling numb too. But the truth is, it rarely happens that way. Your timeline and their timeline are completely different. And this difference is where so much unnecessary pain and overthinking comes from. And life, and by the way, there are so many unnecessary pain and overthinking comes from. You might feel like the weight of it all hits you the second they walk away. Suddenly, there's this gaping hole in your chest. Everything reminds you of them. The way the couch feels too big now, the quietness of your phone, the absence of their name popping up when something funny happens. It's overwhelming. And because you're sitting in that rawness, you assume they're going through the exact same thing at the exact same time. But they're not. In the beginning, they're distracted. Maybe they're leaning into their friends, throwing themselves into work, or scrolling endlessly on their phone to fill the silence. They might even look like they're having fun, posting photos, smiling in stories, acting like nothing's changed. And that's the part that stings the most. Because here you are, trying to put yourself back together, while they seem like they're thriving without you. When they seem like they're thriving without you, but don't be fooled. Just because they don't feel it yet doesn't mean they won't. There's this delay in their emotional timeline because they were the one who left. Or even if they didn't leave, they've been preparing in their mind for this moment far longer than you knew. They spent weeks or months convincing themselves this was the right decision. They played out the breakup in their head over and over until they felt numb to it. So by the time they actually walked away, they weren't stepping into heartbreak, they were stepping into relief. That's their initial emotional high. But relief is temporary. See, you hit your low point first. You feel the absence immediately because your emotional investment was still there. You hadn't detached. That's why it's so excruciating. You're living the withdrawal all at once. But here's where it gets fascinating, because while you're sitting there in pain, doing the hard work of feeling, crying, healing, and trying to understand yourself, they're not yet. They're too busy running from the silence. The reality of losing you doesn't hit them right away. It creeps up on them slowly, quietly, like water dripping on stone. At first, they fill their calendar with distractions, drinks with friends, late night texts with someone new, gym sessions, Netflix binges. But eventually, when the noise dies down, they're left alone with their thoughts. And in that stillness, a memory of you surfaces, then another, and another. They start remembering the little things they took for granted, the way you always knew how to calm them down when they were stressed, the sound of your laugh echoing in their kitchen, the comfort of knowing you were there, even on their worst days. These moments don't rush in like a tidal wave. They seep in, drop by drop, until one day they wake up and realize your absence feels heavier than they expected. And here's the part they didn't see coming. By the time this realization hits them, you've already started to shift. You've been sitting with your pain, you've been processing it, growing through it, and slowly rebuilding the parts of yourself you thought were tied to them. You've been learning to breathe again without their presence. And while they're just starting to feel the emptiness, you're finally filling yourself back up. That's why it feels so intense for them when it finally lands. It's not just that they miss you, it's that they're forced to confront the fact that you're no longer waiting in the same place they left you. And that's terrifying. This is why patience is so powerful, because while you're tempted to break the silence, to check in, to remind them of what they've lost, the real shift happens when you don't. The silence isn't empty. It's full of lessons for you and for them. So when you find yourself wondering if they're thinking about you yet, if they regret losing you yet, if they feel your absence yet, remind yourself their timeline isn't your timeline. And that's okay. The truth is, when the reality of your absence finally sinks in, it often hits them far harder than it hit you. Because by then, you're not the same person they walked away from. You've already started becoming someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who no longer needs them to feel whole. And that's when your absence doesn't just feel like a void in their life, it feels like the biggest mistake they ever made. When you stop reaching out, when you stop chasing, something shifts. Not just in your life, but in theirs too. At first, they might not even notice it. They may carry on thinking you're still there, waiting in the background, ready to pick up the pieces whenever they feel like tossing them your way. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, a space begins to form. The calls they used to ignore aren't there anymore. The texts that once lit up their screen, even if they didn't always respond, are suddenly gone. And it's in that silence that they start to feel something they weren't prepared for: the loss of your energy. See, people don't just miss you because you're absent physically. They miss you because your energy, your presence, has been such a constant that its withdrawal feels like the oxygen in the room has been sucked out. That energy you poured into them, whether it was through support, affection, or even arguments, was a connection they leaned on more than they realized. The moment you stop giving that, it's like a tether is cut. And it's in that moment they begin to wonder, wait, what's changed? Why does it feel different now? But here's the thing, they don't always recognize this shift right away. At first, they might interpret it as freedom. They may think they finally got the space they craved. They'll convince themselves this is what they wanted all along. But over time, when they notice the absence of your effort, your warmth, your investment, the story in their head begins to change. That voice of certainty starts to crack, replaced by questions they weren't asking before. You see, when you stop showing up, they're forced to confront a very uncomfortable truth. You were never guaranteed to be there forever. They may have thought they had time to decide how they felt, time to keep you on standby while they figured themselves out. But now, with the weight of your absence pressing in, they realize that time isn't infinite. And for the first time, they see you not as someone orbiting their world, but as someone who could very well leave it for good. This is the paradox. The less you try to prove your worth to them, the more they begin to value what you brought to their life. The moment you reclaim your energy, shift your focus back to yourself, they start to feel the imbalance. Because while you were busy giving, they were used to receiving. Now they're left with a void they don't know how to fill. And it's not just about missing you, it's about missing the way they felt when they had access to you. That's why this shift hits so deeply. They're not only realizing you're gone, but they're realizing how much of their identity, their routine, even their sense of importance was tied to your attention. What makes this so powerful is that it's not something you can fake. You can't pretend to shift your energy and expect them to feel it. They feel it when it's real. When you actually let go, when you decide their validation isn't the prize anymore, and that's when the dynamic changes. And the irony is, the very moment you stop needing them to come back is often when they're pulled in your direction again. But here's the truth. By the time they feel this, you might already be too far ahead to care. You may have started building a life so full, so rich, that the thought of returning to that old version of you, the one who waited, hoped, and overgave, feels impossible. And maybe that's the greatest shift of all. Not that they miss you, but that you finally stopped missing them. Because when your energy moves on, when you reclaim your power, that's when they'll feel it. And it'll hit harder than they ever imagined. When it finally hits them, it doesn't just hit, it crashes like a tidal wave they never saw coming. At first, they thought they'd be fine without you. They told themselves they were ready to move on, that the space you occupied in their life could be easily filled with other things, more work, more friends, more distractions. In their mind, they assumed you'd just fade quietly into the background while they carried on with life as usual. But what they didn't realize was that your presence wasn't something ordinary. It wasn't something they could simply replace or forget. You weren't just another person in their world. You were their comfort, their anchor, their source of emotional nourishment. And when that's gone, there's no substitute that can truly satisfy that emptiness. In the beginning, they felt in control. They felt justified. They told themselves the choice they made was right. But as time went on, the silence between you started to grow louder. The distractions that once kept their mind occupied began to lose their effect. Nights out that felt exciting at first started to feel repetitive and hollow. Conversations with others lacked the depth they once had with you. Even the simple routines, sending you a funny meme, venting about their day, hearing your voice before bed, was suddenly gone. And it's in those quiet, unguarded moments that the reality started creeping in. Here's what they didn't see coming: the shift in your energy. The moment you stopped chasing, stopped explaining yourself, stopped trying to fix what was broken, they felt it. It's almost like they could sense on some deep level that your attention had turned inward. You were no longer revolving around them, and that's when their mind began replaying everything they once took for granted. The way you understood them without words, the way you celebrated their wins and supported them through their losses, the way you showed up fully, consistently, and wholeheartedly. They start to ask themselves questions they didn't expect to ask. Did they overestimate how easy it would be to let go? Did they make a mistake? Would you even want them back now? They begin scrolling through old photos, reading through old texts, searching for some reminder of the connection that once felt so certain. And when they see you living your life, growing, smiling without them, it hits even harder, because now they're faced with the possibility that you're not just gone, you're moving on. It's in this moment that regret takes hold. They realized they didn't just lose a relationship, they lost someone rare, someone who cared deeply, someone who invested in them fully. And as much as they might try to fight it, they can't help but wonder if anyone else will ever make them feel the way you did. That realization doesn't come gently. It comes like a punch to the chest, because they weren't expecting to miss you this much. They weren't expecting their world to feel this quiet without you in it. The irony is, by the time they're feeling all of this, you've already begun to heal. You've taken the pain they caused and used it as fuel to grow stronger. You've started building a life where your happiness doesn't depend on them showing up. And as they wrestle with their emotions, regret, longing, maybe even jealousy, you're no longer the same person they left behind. You've evolved. You've learned your worth. This is why it hits them harder than they ever imagined. Because losing you wasn't temporary. It wasn't a phase they could circle back to when they felt ready. It was real. And now, they're the ones left wondering if the door they closed will ever open again. And maybe it won't. Because the truth is, by the time they feel the full weight of your absence, you're already too far ahead to look back.